one of the things that that drives me a little bit crazy, and which I'm glad you guys are looking at a little bit, is when you buy stuff online, there is no legal requirement from online retailers to list country of origin of the product. So if you walk into Walmart, you can flip it over and see where it's made. If you buy it on Amazon or Walmart online, you can't see where it's made. And so people who would prefer not to buy something that may have been made by slave labor online, you don't know. And in Amazon, if you go down to the comments, you'll often see, is this made in China? Is this made? People want to know. But there was an active, very well-funded lobbying effort to derail legislation that would have made that compulsory, listing country of origin for online retailers. There was legislation. Amazon was against it. Walmart was against it, that sort of thing. So that tool, even that tool of being able to vote with your pocketbook, has been taken away through lobbying. That's a whole other method of using proxies to achieve your unrestricted warfare aims that's been very effectively deployed.
That reminds me, we made a pilot about that for our Unmade in China show.
Where we actually did talk about that specific
issue.
That specific law that kind of died quietly in Congress. Yeah. And Amazon's justification is that they have so many third-party sellers, they can't be held liable for whether the third-party sellers are going to be honest or not.
Right, but I mean that's the same issue with printing it on the boxes too, right?
Well, I mean, but there is a law that it actually.
I know.
U.S. Customs can bring legal action against you for not doing that.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, still, there are people who try to lie and they put something else on the box. Or like I'm thinking about that honey that was from Dubai. Where they have so many beehives.
Oh yeah, where they basically honey was banned from China because of some
hormone
they were using chemicals that aren't illegal in the U.S.
Right, so they just send it through a third country and then label it as
Or I had to buy my phone was running out of batteries. I had to buy one of those power banks. And I had no choice because there was only one kind of power bank at the CVS. But on the outside it said "Designed in America" and nothing else. There was no other made-in information on the outside of the box because they had actually put it on the product where it said "Made in China" on the actual power bank. But by that point, you've already bought it and taken it out of the packaging. So, you can't really do anything about that.
Anything that says "Designed in America," that's a red flag.
Yeah. I mean,
but
they were able to get around that customs law because the customs law is that you have to have it either on the box or the physical product. So they put it on the product. It was sneaky.
Yes.
And really, this just goes back to, again, what you're saying about, needing to have the right use of language. And that's why I'm always trying to say we need to call them the dirty reds,
Actually, but that is very easily weaponized, which is why I refuse to say that. Because then you can get into the whole McCarthy thing.
Wait, what are you refusing to say?
The term that I'm not going to say. Nice try.
That was a nice try. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
I don't actually.
Okay.
But go on and make your point.
Well, my point was that we're talking about how yellow peril and the
red peril
can be weaponized in the same way that yellow peril and racism can be weaponized by the CCP. Red peril can be weaponized just as easily because then you go back to are you going to do this? You're going to persecute people for their political beliefs? Are you going to do a McCarthy? It is very easy to turn that around and be see these people they're against China. They're accusing us of being the words that I'm not going to say.
So even if you say China's the enemy or the Chinese Communist Party is the enemy, wouldn't that just get you right back there as well?
But I think saying the Chinese Communist Party is the enemy is different than saying the DR word, right?
Democratic Republic?
You know what I'm saying.
I don't.
I'm not going to say it, and you're not going to get me to say it.
But there are also a lot of Americans, especially at universities, who are fine with communism.
That's true too.
Yeah. So, which is why picking very clear cases like fentanyl, where there's none of this other stuff is involved. This is clearly a policy of the Chinese government. This doesn't have to do with ethnic Chinese people in any way. In fact, the drugs are coming into the country mostly through the Mexican cartels or those dirty Canadians, as you mentioned.
Dirty Canadians is okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
That's okay. Canucks, actually, what's called, yeah. The snowbacks, as we come in through the border like that.
I haven't even heard that slur.
So if you pick your topics really, clearly, and then that helps you to think about it. And then that lets you branch out into other things. Okay, well, if they're doing fentanyl, what else are they doing, for example? So just instead of, unless you've read Marxist-Leninism and you know what they're actually doing at a macro level, if you have a case study that has really done unbelievable amount of damage to this country deliberately, that could be stopped immediately, then you can get confused. So if you start with those very specific examples, like TikTok, like we talked about TikTok a lot, and it's worth talking about. But if you're trying to talk to friends or relatives or whatever who may be uncomfortable with a lot of these other things that we're talking about, building out from fentanyl may be a gateway drug to understanding what is actually going on.
So you mean when I've been shouting at parties about the dirty Reds, I might have actually been pushing people away?
Yeah. Well, this is because they've done this in so many different sectors, like, for example, maps and globes, right? Where they've taken, which is so we know those three warfares. We know psychological, media, and lawfare. Personally, I think the invisible fourth one is education, going into education systems and distorting them. And that doesn't necessarily just mean, and this is this TikTok thing, it doesn't necessarily mean pushing a Chinese narrative. It could mean getting you to hate America, getting you to think that the American system is a terrible system. Because remember, comprehensive national power, if you can do it two ways, your country gets better or the other country gets worse.
So because America does have real flaws, if you emphasize those flaws, then you can offer a solution, like burn down all of the creameries.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So America has flaws, so destroy America.
Yeah, the communists do take advantage of people's ignorance of history to sell very simplistic narratives.
Yeah, which are particularly appealing to, younger people, but also to desperate people, to people who are really suffering and
people suffer more when there's a lot of chaos or entropy in society.
Yeah.
Or fentanyl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do. So it's not that warfare in the tropics, doesn't necessarily just stay in the tropics. The goal is, keeping with the heat theme, to melt down those societies. And it goes back, like you said, to the original foundation of the principles behind the founding of the Chinese Communist Party, and this sort of destroy the systems and then recreate the new ones. And I would add on to that a layer of wanting to be kind of a 19th century style colonial power, right? So you want to what you do when you melt it down isn't necessarily to create an Eastern Bloc, an Eastern Europe type situation, but to create more of a British colonial structure where you can have a local administration, but you're sucking out the resources and you're controlling foreign policy and defense and things like that.
Well, I think since you so expertly brought us back to the beginning of the podcast, I think this might be a good place to wrap up. But I do think really one of the valuable things that came out of this conversation is specific tactics that people can use. Because this is something people are always asking me, what can I do? Well, changing how you talk about the Communist Party, how you understand it, using things like fentanyl to talk to your friends and family about it in a way to get them to understand that.
Like calling it chemical warfare. Understanding that China is attacking, the Communist Party is attacking America with these things.
Yeah, so people come to the conclusion that the Chinese Communist Party is your enemy.
Are there other things that would
So my friend Paul tells me repeatedly that I always forget to say, one of the things that would make a huge, would be very impactful, is to talk about how much money the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party have, and how corrupt they are, and how they, where did Xi Jinping's daughter go to school?
Harvard.
So we should all know that, and the Chinese people should know that, as many as possible. And they should just know that they're not dealing with, they're authoritarian and they're Marxist-Leninist or this or that or whatever. They're also really corrupt.
Yeah, they're also great at making money. I think China has considerably more millionaire politicians like per capita than the United States.
Yeah.
And we have a lot here as well, but
yeah, and it functions like a mob family. I mean, the taking out Hu Jintao, that was a mob move, right?
You gotta make him an offer he can't refuse.
That's right. And we don't know what fishing fleet he's sleeping with right now. But that issue of making it very clear that these are also very corrupt people might be helpful. And when the Chinese Communist Party goes into a country, there's the commercial front. So they might talk about, for example, the fishing element tied into the strategic component, which is that fishing fleet might have containerized missiles hidden in them or whatever. But then there's always a corruption element. And that corruption element is the string that democracies can pull on most effectively. So in the case of Sogavare, Prime Minister Sogavare, for example, he has been bought off. That grouping has had a lot of Chinese money flow through it, and some of that has been used to buy Australian real estate, for example. Start going after the corrupt money. Start making leaders in Solomon's know that if they take Chinese money, they may never get a visa to Australia or New Zealand again. They may end up with their assets seized. They may, and then you're fighting not by giving them guns. You're fighting by giving them transparency, accountability, rule of law, all of the things that we say we believe in. So,
well, we believe in guns too.
Oh yeah, well,
amen.
So, be very clear that there is an illegal, corrupt component to the leadership and to the system, and go after that all across the board, from the top down to the beaches of Guadalcanal.
This is kind of what the Magnitsky sanctions kind of do, right? Like the idea is that you single out specific officials who have done terrible, corrupt things, human rights violating things, but you also expose the fact that they have, yachts in Europe or property in the US or whatever, and you cut them off from that.
Yeah. So in the case of the Solomons, Sogavare might be making whatever he's making from the Chinese, and he'll give a cut of that to those MPs. And we saw in the Marshalls, the amounts. Solomons is a bit more, but in the Marshalls, the amounts were like $7,000, $22,000. If they know that they can take the $7,000, but they may never be able to travel to the States without the risk of getting arrested, that $7,000 doesn't look so good anymore.
Right. Or if they knew how much bribes in other places were, they'd be like, I need a lot more than $7,000 to take this risk.
Well, there is that. But then maybe you can bankrupt the Chinese Communist Party on the way down. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my threshold for selling out to the Communist Party is a lot higher than $7,000. Like it's at least $8,000.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's Canadian dollars?
No, American dollars.
All right. Damn. Can't afford you then.
Well, thank you so much for joining us in person today, Cleo. This had some real actionable items.
Yeah, but pleasure. And thank you for relocating your studio to the wilds of northern Quebec so that it's so easy to come and visit you.
Yes. You disclosed our undisclosed location. Oh, no. Now the dirty Reds can find us.
You're still never going to get me to say it.
Yeah.
Say what?
You know what?